webinar, What's New in PhD Virtual Backup version 7.0 for Hyper-V. My name is Mark McHenry. I'll be your moderator for this webcast. And joining me here today is Sarah Doyle, PhD Virtual SE. So let's get started. We'll take a look at the agenda for today. And so just briefly, I'll start out by telling you a little bit about who we are. Then I'm going to hand off to Sarah, who's going to talk to you about the features and benefits, talk a little bit about the new version 7 architecture, go through some installation and configuration, then talk about some future functionality, and we have a very special surprise at the end. We call the no-brainer surprise. And lastly, we'll end with a demo of version 7.0, PhD Virtual Backup, and some Q&A. So please text any questions you might have in the chat section of your GoToWebinar pane at the bottom, and we'll handle them as best we can at the end as time permits. And one other thing I should say is we are recording this, so I know we're going to get some questions about that. So you can go to our website later on, or if you have colleagues that ought to hear what we have to say, just go to the PhD Virtual website under Resources and Events, and you'll find the recorded webinars and also other live webinars that are going to be coming up. So with that, why don't we go ahead and take a look at who we are. PhD Virtual offers the best value in data protection and recovery assurance for virtual and cloud environments. See there on the right a number of the larger organizations that we do business with. We do business with everyone from the Fortune 500 to small mom-and-pop shops and everyone in between. We've experienced 14 quarters of record growth. We have over 6,500 customers. You can see some of the awards we've won here on this slide on the bottom, highlighted by the fastest growing startup from storage.com, two-time winner, Best of VMworld. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Sarah, and she's going to take you through the features and benefits and the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Now let's talk about what PhD Virtual 7.0 is going to include. So as far as enhancements, the most obvious one is that we're going to now support Hyper-V. And the versions of Hyper-V that we are going to support are Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. Now we are keeping the same technology that we are going to be an image-based backup that does not require agents. We're going to offer a single pass recovery, attach virtual disks on SMB shares. And the great enhancement that Hyper-V provides over the other hypervisors is that virtual disks can be run on SMB shares. This means that SMB shares become optimized backup targets for our VDA, because you can attach the backup data store, or VDS, as a virtual disk. So lastly, with the release of PhD Virtual version 7.0 for Hyper-V, PhD will be the first to support all three major hypervisors using agentless data protection methods. This is pretty important. So we're currently supporting VMware, Citrix XenCenter, and now we're supporting Hyper-V as well. And it's important to clarify that 7.0 supports Hyper-V only. So users of vSphere and XenServer will still be leveraging the latest 6.5 release until we bring those hypervisors into the v7 architecture, and that'll be sometime in 2014. Now, some of the easier management tools that we can take a look at is that we are going to be offering a per VM option, and that's going to be around retention policies and backup storage. So what this means is that a fundamental goal of this release was to enable large-scale management of many DBAs. Our current architecture is very easy to use for our small, mid-sized customers with smaller environments. But we need to make some enhancements to ensure that it's going to be a simple management for our large customers with very large environments. Now, the way the VMs are protected is different in version 6 than it's going to be in version 7. So instead of creating the job first, you can use the protect page to select VMs or container VMs, such as a host, and then assign the options you wish to use for protection. And what this means is that you're going to be able to back up your entire host with just one simple click, but then you can drill down into different options for each VM. So it's going to be a little more flexible and easier to use, in that I can customize retention policies at a per VM basis. Now, the automatic VBA selection, now this is pretty exciting. So what you're going to do is you're just going to select the VMs and the options that you want. And then PhD is actually going to take the smarts and the technology to select which VBA is going to be best to back up that virtual machine. There's still going to be a 1-to-1 ratio for VBA to BDS ratio, but we'll select which one's going to be most available and consume the least amount of resources as far as storage capacity to back up your VMs. Now, jobs can span multiple VBAs. You can create one large job, and multiple VBAs will actually take over backing up what is going to be the best virtual machine to VBA ratio. So we're also going to support a larger backup data store. Now, what this means is that we're going to support larger than 2 terabyte partitions, and there's going to be fewer disks needed on each VBA. So handling large inventory sets and backup catalogs is going to be much easier. Aside from making job management easier, VBAs are now going to be able to point to their backup data store and back up to, say, 10 terabyte partitions, as opposed to having 5 2 terabyte partitions. This is really going to make your VDS management much more simplified. So now let's talk about an architecture overview. And this is going to be very important because, as I mentioned earlier, it's extremely different than what it was in our version 6. So now what we're first going to look at is the new v7 architecture is going to leverage a web-based interface. The UI is now managed by a new role within the VBA called the presentation role. And the second role that the VBA can have is the management role. The component of the VBA handles inventory and protection management within a particular virtual environment. So in the context of Hyper-V, an environment is either a single host or a collection of hosts that you designate PhD to manage as a single environment. The last role of the VBA that the VBA can be assigned is the engine role. So this is really just the workhorse that's going to be handling all the actual processing of your virtual machine, so all the backups and the recoveries. Now, a simple single VBA environment will automatically take on all 3 of these roles. However, for multiple VBA environments, you may have multiple engines to scale out to larger data sets. Additionally, if you are managing multiple environments for a single interface, you will need multiple managers. However, they can only be a single presentation role if you wish to leverage a centralized interface across multiple environments. So the presentation VBA is going to be the connection to the web-based interface that you're going to be viewing. So being able to consolidate or spread out these roles across VBAs allows for easy deployment in smaller environments and higher performance management in very large environments. So as we can see here, okay. So another component is going to be the PhD Hyper-V services. Now this is going to be installed on every Hyper-V host that you want to protect. And these services are going to manage the Hyper-V functions needed for your data protection. And lastly is the RabbitMQ. So this is a communication between PhD Virtual Backup and the layers of the VBA and the Hyper-V services. So Hyper-V requires additional components for agentless data protection. The PhD Hyper-V services, again, as I mentioned, are installed on each host, and it coordinates specific business logic and provides communication between all of the VBAs in your environment. And this just kind of is under the covers and allows for ease of use and communication between your host, your VBAs, and the Hyper-V services. So now let's take a look at, again, the architecture behind 7.0. So taking a glimpse into the future of the 7X releases, you can really see how this new architecture allows PhD to manage across multiple environments and across multiple hypervisors. So keep in mind, this is the future of the version 7 for PhD. So all of this centralized web-based interface is going to allow you to manage, again, across multiple hypervisors and multiple hosts. So each hypervisor environment will leverage one-to-many processing engine. And each environment needs at least one manager role deployed in order to handle inventory and job management for that environment. Then a single presentation role is assigned to be the centralized interface. So as you can see here, I have my single presentation VBA, and that's managing all of VBAs across all of my hypervisors that I can see here. So scalability is easily handled for large inventory sets, and reporting across all the environments is really simplified in this new architecture. So notice that the requirement to install software on a host is only applicable to Hyper-V. So there's not going to be any requirements for services to run on your vSphere or Zen server. And when we add those hypervisors into the new architecture over the next couple of releases, you'll understand why, because of the way that Windows is handled compared to VMware and Zen server. So now let's talk about the installation behind version 7.0. So here's a quick look at the pre-install checklist. And it's pretty straightforward. You're going to need to know how you would like your VBA to network in the environment. The key to remember here is that either Chrome or Firefox is needed to use our web interface. We don't support the Internet Explorer in version 7. And of course, the web browser must be run from a machine that can route to the VBA. Now, some of the installation components. So there's two components that need to be installed for 7.0. And one is the Hyper-V services, and the other is the VBA. Now, the Hyper-V services are manually installed on each host that runs the VMs that you want to protect. For authentication purposes, you'll need to add PhD user credentials that will be used for communication between the PhD Hyper-V services and the VBA with the management role. Now, this process is quite simple, and it's handled by a small installation program that you simply download in the software package from the PhD Virtual website. So next, you'll use the PhD Hyper-V administration tool to deploy all of your VBAs. And for our current customers that are currently working in vSphere or Zen server environment, and you're familiar with the PhD Virtual Backup, you'll notice that Hyper-V is pretty different in its deployment of the VMs. So please ensure that you check the installation guide for the step-by-step instructions to deploy the VBAs, because it is a little different. So the v7 architecture provides two virtual disks with the VBA. The first disk is the usual OS disk, and then the second disk is going to house the important configuration data for the VBA. You'll add a third disk as the backup target after the VBA is deployed. And the reason we added the second disk to the VBA is so that a VBA and its OS disk could be discarded, and a new VBA can connect to your data disk to preserve all necessary configuration information. If you'd like to change the virtual CPU or memory settings, you can very easily do that after the VBA has been imported into your environment. So here's a quick example of a deployment across multiple hosts. You can see PhD services installed on each Hyper-V host. PhD built a capability to allow you to designate a single host as the master host of a multi-host environment that uses shared storage. So this allows you to configure a single VBA to protect VMs running on either host. The major benefit here is that PhD Virtual Backup does not need to be cluster aware. So in order to manage configurations using cluster shared volumes and shared storage, VMs can move freely between hosts, and PhD will be able to communicate to protect those VMs as needed. And it is important to note that all the duplications will be maintained as VMs move from host to host. So that's a pretty nice feature of this new architecture. And as Mark mentioned earlier, there's some feature functionality we're going to talk about, as well as a great big surprise for everybody. So let's talk about 7.1 and beyond. There are a few key features that are going to be added, and that's going to be in 2014 in version 7.1 and 7.2. So we plan to add support for vSphere in 7.1, and then Zen Server in 7.2, so that users can manage multiple hypervisors through a centralized interface. By 7.1, we expect to have Hyper-V to have VSS and change block tracking. So change tracking is really important to us for improving the read times of backup processes. So if you use vSphere, you know the impact. You know the difference that CVT is going to enhance your backup performance. And because Hyper-V doesn't offer a VM-based change tracking API, we have to develop this technology in-house. So across these two releases, we'll also be adding advanced features such as instant VM recovery, which involves running the VM directly from the backup storage. We'll have backup archiving, which is an automated off-site copy of your backup. There'll be certified replica and certified backup, which are very advanced automated application, verification, and SLA management features. So that'll be provided by PHP Virtual's backup integration with our Reliable DR product. And then VM replication will also be included, and so many more features that we're really excited to start rolling out within the next year. Okay, now the no-brainer surprise is 7.0 is free. There is no licensing charge. So when we go GA this December 18th, I think is the target date, there's one key reason to keep using version 7.0 for Hyper-V, and it's free. And that's a wonderful, it's a wonderful thing to hear, especially in this day and age. Now you can have the option of purchasing support contracts, and that'll give you PhD support access, updates to 7.1 and beyond. If you don't want to purchase the support, continue to use 7.0 as long as you'd like. Form support or best effort on PhD side will be offered, of course, but you can purchase licenses for 7.1 and later. So there's a little note at the bottom that details and go-to-market strategies are subject to change. Okay, so with that, we are going to go ahead and move into the demo of PHP Virtual Hyper-V. So bear with me one moment as I get my GoToWebinar in order. Okay, so here we go. Now this is a web-based interface, and I am using Google Chrome. And as you can see, we are viewing the dashboard. And the dashboard is going to give you a quick view of all of your backup jobs. What VMs are being protected, are there any errors, which VMs are not being protected. And what's really nice about this interface is you're going to be able to see some speeds just by hovering over these little dots that are on this chart. And it'll tell you your read, write, and compress speed. So instead of having to go drilling into logs and digging through that information, I can quickly get this information just by hovering over these dots right here. So this is pretty useful. I'm also going to get a quick view of my storage. I'm going to be able to see at a VBA level, what's being used and what's being consumed. And I'm also going to get my write speed on average, as well as daily growth. So that's really going to be helpful in expanding your environment, including more VMs. So this daily growth and daily change rate are something new to PHP as far as making it obvious to the users right at the dashboard level. I'll also be able to see what alerts I have pending or any active jobs for right now. So now let's move into Protect. So this is where I'm going to be able to schedule the backups or recoveries for my environment. Now, I can see on the left-hand side here I have my two hosts. I have my Hyper-V host 01 and Hyper-V host 02. Now, if I expand these, I'm going to be able to see all the VMs that I have in my environment. And as I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, I can just select to back up this whole host and then just do all the configuration settings at a VM level. So I'm backing up my whole host here. So let's see, I want to use Quiesce for my test Ubuntu machine, but not for any of the other ones. I can go ahead and simply change these up. Well, it's a Linux, but so I can change my verify type. So when it's my Windows machine, this is where I can, select verify. I can select the Quiesce or truncate logs if I have guest tools installed. If I hit next, I'm going to be able to define a backup mode. So for virtual full, this is going to be ideal if we're going to an attached virtual disk storage. Or the full incremental is going to be ideal for network storage or current ID Duke devices, tape, and any other offsite storage. I have an option to pin the backup so that it'll be retained indefinitely and it won't be deleted via the retention policy. I can go ahead and include my email information so I can get reports on how my jobs are performing. And I can schedule this. And what's really cool about this schedule is that it's going to allow me to select recur so that I can have this backup recur every 15 minutes if I need it. And since I have phone incremental selected here, I'm going to be able to select how many days a week I want to have a full run. and I can even change my start time. So once I hit submit, that job will be created, and I'll be good to go. So now let's talk about recovery. So for recovery in virtual machines, let's say I'm going to select my test Ubuntu here. If I expand that, I'll just be able to see all of my backup dates. I'm going to have the option to select recover, which will prompt me through a wizard that will lead to a full VM recovery. Or I have rollback and recover individual files. So let's start with the full VM recovery. I'm going to give this job a name. I can see here that I have my backup already selected. And if I didn't have my backup selected, I can go ahead and filter through some options here so I can quickly identify a virtual machine that I need to recover. And my recovery options are going to be a verify type, power on VM after the recovery, and even connect to the network upon recovery. I can even schedule this to happen at a later date and time. So let's say I knew that I'm going to need to recover this VM sometime next week. I can go ahead and just schedule that so I don't forget. And again, email address, so I can get some email reporting on my job, how it's performing. Well, let's check a future date for the 18th. There we go. Okay, so I'll get a quick summary of my job. I'll see the target host, the target storage, disk storage, and which VM network. And I'll hit submit, and that will be scheduled. And okay. So now let's talk about rollback recovery. Now, what rollback recovery means is that I'm going to just restore changes over top an existing VM. So for example, let's say that I applied some patches to a Windows server and it didn't go well. So all I would need to do is come to this console, run through this easy-to-use wizard and make my selection, and I can roll back that virtual machine to a previous healthy point in time without having to take a snapshot and revert back to the snapshot. This is a really simple method of just having a quick backup, restoring a few changes, and being up and running with a healthy state of my VM. Now, file recovery. So this is where I can just individually recover files from a certain virtual machine without having to restore the entire VM. And I can do this through multiple methods. I can either create a Windows CIF share, or I can leverage iSCSI. Really, it's just whatever you're more comfortable with doing. I can specify certain credentials for file recovery, and that would have been in the configuration of the VBA. I can create that credentials. So if I hit create, then I would be able to just simply open a Windows Explorer session and browse to that information that I want to recover. So now if I move down to jobs, this is where I'm going to be able to manage all of my scheduled jobs. I can create a job. If I move over into the job manager, I'm going to be able to see, okay, this recovery has been scheduled for the 18th. I can go ahead and edit that information right from here. I can make a copy, so I can make a duplicate. I'll disable or delete it, and I can even run it right now if I needed to. Also get some details. And then the history will just tell me, what's been going on in my environment and how everything has been running. If I now move over into reports, this is where I can very quickly get a report ad hoc. So it'll be my protection summary, which VMs have been protected or unprotected. I'll get a history report and even the storage detail report. So I can go ahead and schedule that, for I want to look back for the past month or however long I want to look back to. I can generate that report, and that will be either emailed to me or whatever I have configured in my environment. I can see my admin account. If I go ahead and select that right there, I'll put my account information. I can also do some editing here. I can change my password if I needed, and even select my time zone. Now if I move down into configure, this is where once I run through the install process of installing the Hyper-V services on each host and have deployed the VBAs, I'll go ahead and configure the VBAs here. So I can see I have VBA 02. If I go down here, this is where I'm going to be able to configure my storage and my networking for that appliance, as well as for my second Hyper-V host. So again, storage and networking for configuring. So that wraps up the demo of PhD Virtual version 7 for Hyper-V. And I'm going to open this up to any questions that you may have. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just type them right into the chat session. And you can either chat them in right now, or you can visit our website at www.phdvirtual.com, or feel free to email sales@phdvirtual.com, or use any of the phone numbers that are listed on the screen, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So again, I'm just going to leave it open for a few minutes and let people type in any questions and comments that they may have, and we'll answer them as they come in. Okay, so let's see. Does version 7 for Hyper-V support archive data store sync? So as of right now, we are not going to be supporting the syncing of the backup data store just yet, but that is definitely coming down the road. Okay, sure. I have another one here. When is version 7 going to support vSphere and XenServer? So we will be supporting vSphere and XenServer. vSphere will be released in 7.1. That's definitely due out in 2014, as well as XenServer will be shortly following that in version 7.2, again releasing in 2014. And another question here, is this being recorded? Yes, this webinar is being recorded. If you would like to come back and reference this webinar or send it to colleagues, you can visit our website at www.phdvirtual.com. And as well as this webinar, there's many other videos and resources, white papers, documentation, all sorts of goodies that we like to provide on our website. Okay, so I'm going to, again, leave this open just for a few more moments. Let anybody type in their questions as they come. Okay, so another question here. Is there an easy path to upgrade from a XenServer license to a Hyper-V license? So the answer to that question is that Hyper-V version 7.0 is free right now. So you won't need to license your host, although you can purchase support. And that can really be answered better by our sales reps. So you can just send a quick email to sales@phdvirtual.com, and they'll definitely get back to you with that information. But again, version 7 for Hyper-V is going to be free. It's support that you can pay for. So when is the expected release date for the Hyper-V version? So we are expecting to release within the next few weeks. So we are in beta right now. I know that we're still open and taking beta participants. So if that's something you're interested in, again, you can just visit our website and we'll get you into our beta program. Okay, so can version 7 manage 6.5 VBAs? So that's a no, because 6.5 VBAs are only going to be vSphere and XenServer. It's going to be a completely different platform. So if you are moving to the 7.1 for vSphere, due out next year, you're going to need to deploy new VBAs. As a best practice, PhD Virtual recommends for all of our major releases deploying a new VBA. They're disposable, so it's a really easy upgrade. Okay, so I'm going to leave this open for a few more minutes. These are some great questions that we have coming in. All right, so if there are no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the chat session. And just thank everybody for joining our webinar today of PhD Virtual Backup for Hyper-V. And we look forward to having any feedback. Please feel free to participate in our beta program. But again, we're going GA in just a few weeks, so we're really excited to get this out in the marketplace and hear what our customers have to say. So again, thank you for joining our webinar today, and we look forward to hearing from you.